bad things happen to all of us. And so instead of asking, why me, relating it to, why me? It shouldn't be happening. This can't be happening. It's more, why not me?
Janet Curry is a psychotherapist, a mindfulness teacher, teacher trainer, and a cancer survivor.
I think I learned through cancer that as we engage with the challenge, the unwanted, it has the capacity to develop who we are as a human being. What do I have to learn here? What can this teach me? How can this grow my heart?
We're human. We're going to face moments of deep pain, agony, sorrow, and deep moments of joy.
I think this possibility that we can grow in who we are. We can grow our minds, we can grow our hearts, we can become more and more of what's deepest and best in ourselves.
That's the beauty of being human. I just want to quickly thank you for stopping by and starting to watch this Pause to Elevate podcast. If we haven't met before, I am Dr. Kasim Al-Mashat, registered psychologist, mindfulness teacher, teacher trainer, and just a human interested in mindset, mindfulness, and principles in psychology that can make a difference in your daily life. My mission is to support you in understanding your mind to transform your life. If you've subscribed, thank you so much. If you haven't done yet, go ahead and click that button. It really helps me to keep this going and reach out to more guests. You can also join our community by signing up to the free newsletter right over here, and it will keep you up to date on online courses about laughter, mindfulness, retreats, online programs, a lot of goodies. Would love to see you there. Meanwhile, enjoy this episode that's really intended to be for educational purposes and not a replacement for any advice, care, or direction from a healthcare provider. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I am so excited to share today's conversation with one of my favorite people. I have to say, I feel so fortunate to be able to call her as a friend and a colleague. My guest today is Janet Curry. She's a licensed professional counselor in private practice in Santa Fe, New Mexico. She's a certified mindfulness based stress reduction MBSR teacher and teacher trainer, as well as a mindfulness based cognitive therapy or MBCT teacher and teacher trainer as well. She's an adjunct faculty member at Brown University's School of Professional Studies and offers trauma sensitive mindfulness trainings and other workshops in the US and internationally. She is passionate about sharing ways in which mindfulness can increase well being, clarity, and joy. If you feel you can use a little boost in your well being, a little more clarity, and wanting a little more joy, maybe you can join us today. We will also explore the use of mindfulness and the mindset it takes in working with the unwanted that shows up in life, including Janet's journey with cancer. Janet Curry, welcome to the Pause to Elevate podcast. Warm welcome to you.
Kasim, thank you so much. It's just
I
lovely to get to talk with you at any time, in any place.
Thank you so much. It really is a treat and just another excuse to connect.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if we can begin with. I was thinking if we go back to the younger you, this teenage you, would she have imagined the journey you've been on that has brought so much richness, heartfulness, and really supporting so many people in healing and changing? Would she have imagined this journey you've been on?
Mm. You know, it almost brings tears to my eyes, actually, because it wouldn't have been in my lexicon, it wouldn't have been in my vocabulary that there were opportunities to engage in our lives in the way that I've learned through mindfulness, nor would I have thought it would be possible to get to work with and learn from so many glorious human beings, which I have through my counseling practice and through my teaching. So, um, just as you say it that way, I'm pausing to think of what a privilege it's been, to engage in the work that I have for so many years and be my life has been touched so profoundly by the people I've met and learned from and learned with.
Mm.
Yeah. It's interesting, as a teenager, I was drawn to alternative ways of viewing the world. I grew up in Kansas City, Missouri, in a middle upper class home, very privileged in ways that I didn't even recognize then. But I also, was alive very young during the Vietnam War, and I remember an older cousin having wearing a POW bracelet and hearing about meditation from her and beginning the practice of transcendental meditation right
Mm.
after I got my driver's license at 16. I went to the
Oh,
local,
wow.
local TM classroom in my hometown. And honestly, many people I knew, including my mom, thought I was a little bit nuts, but it spoke to me somehow, this way of working with the mind to hold steady in the face of the difficulties that arise in life. So there were glimmerings, even as a teenager, but yeah, nothing of what this path could become.
Yeah. It's so difficult for us to imagine when we're in a certain point looking forward. But often it's easy to connect the dots looking back, like, oh, this led to this led to this. But when we're middle of something, it's hard to imagine. And
Yeah.
it's just a beautiful journey you've been on. I wonder if we go to this, you were sharing so beautifully said about your early experience with meditation and holding steady in what shows up in life.
Mhm.
Can you share a little bit first about what is even TM for those who are not familiar as a form of meditation? And we'll describe just mindfulness and how it's different after. But what is TM for those who've maybe heard of it, but like are mystified? But what is it?
Right. It stands for Transcendental Meditation, not trademark.
Mm, mm,
And it was brought to the U.S. by an Indian Swami guru whose name I hate to say I'm blanking on right now.
mhm,
Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, maybe. I'd have to
mhm.
go do my due diligence. It's been a long time. That's
Yeah.
over 40 years ago that I practiced. And the TM, you are taught a mantra, which is a repetition of certain sounds that you repeat. That was the meditation practice, is to repeat this mantra. Each person has their own individual mantra, and I still know my mantra. It's really a focusing practice to steady the mind through this repetition, and when the mind wanders, you come back to the mantra, to the sounds, and repeat those. Um, Interestingly, Jerry Seinfeld still practices TM twice a day. The instructions were 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening. So it's still out there, transcendental
Yes.
meditation, and wonderful, wonderful.
Mm,
That led me to a yoga practice in my early 20s, which was another doorway in, you might say, to awareness of the body as well as where the mind, is wandering and when it might be getting into the weeds, so to speak, into difficulties, into ruminative patterns that only belabor and maybe amplify our distress.
mm,
So I started with TM, then Iyengar yoga, and it was
mm,
only later that after reading Full Catastrophe Living by John Kabat-Zinn that I started practicing mindfulness meditation. So that was in
mm,
my late 20s, early 30s. Yeah,
mm.
yeah,
So there's something about that. What was it about mindfulness meditation that just pulled your heart? Something resonated that you
yeah.
found a home as a practice. So I'm curious.
I think because John makes clear in Full Catastrophe Living that this is about how we live our lives. It's not really about meditation practice, but it's about how we live our lives and that there are possibilities for cultivating our resources, already ours by virtue of being human, not something we have to go out there and get, that we already have what we need and can cultivate on purpose the inner qualities of steadiness, stability, heartfulness, kindness, broad seeing, a broad perspective that really helps when the rubber meets the road in our lives, when difficulty arises and we might tip towards old patterns that really have everything to do with constriction and restriction and often amplify our own struggles. And so I might just say that I think looking back at the young me, I knew suffering early on. I experienced trauma as a child and didn't have language for that, but was holding some element of pain that it's taken some time. It took some time to begin to identify. But I think there was this curiosity of, how do I work with this? How can life hold sorrows? The Buddhists like to say, life is 10,000 joys, 10,000 sorrows. But when we're suffering, the 10,000 sorrows seem to be everything. So I think there was some instinct or intuition that there's a way to work with it that also allows for opening to the joys. That's what I've been interested in. I think my whole life I still am interested because, of course, it's
Yes.
not like you get there wherever there is and then I'm just done.
We're retiring from all the work and the practices. I've arrived. I can put my feet up and just do nothing.
So it really is a lifetime journey, but also, and I quote John Kabat-Zinn with this too, it's an adventure. And I think this possibility that we can grow in who we are, we can grow our minds, we can grow our hearts, we can become more and more of what's deepest and best in ourselves. This has really intrigued me from very, very early on. And it's, I have to say, proven reliable over, I'm 61, so a few decades of practice here on planet Earth. And I find it very reliable, if not easy, not easy.
No, but reliable. And how you're saying it too reminded me of one of our teachers, Florence Meyer. She reminds us this is about human potential. This mindfulness-based stress reduction, and MBSR. It's about human potential. We often get to it because we want to get rid of stuff. I want to get rid of my thoughts. I want to get rid of my pain. I want to get rid of my stress. But actually, it's being with all of it. And I so appreciate you naming even the 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows. Because I don't know, maybe some of the listeners can relate. When I began my journey, I was just going for the joys. Like, I don't want to look at any sorrow.
Yeah.
I want, and in a way, I missed out for a period because I didn't want to look within. It's like almost this forced positivity. Everything is well, but there isn't a deep connection to what might be difficult.
There's this really deep paradox here, isn't there, Kasim, that to experience greater well-being, clarity, joy, what you said in the bio, what I offer as, possibilities through this work with mindfulness. The deep paradox is it requires us to turn towards what's unwanted, unpleasant, unasked for, and yet is here. It's here. We're not fabricating any difficulties. Like, life brings us plenty without us having to try to, I think it's interesting just even to pause right now and invite the listeners to pause. Like, what's here? What's in the landscape of your life right now? I was telling you right before you press the record button, this morning in my life, There's mold remediation being done in our new home that we moved into.
Mold. The joy
In
of dealing with mold.
mold, remediation happening. And then my husband woke up after a trip east to visit his sister with COVID this morning. Very,
Ah,
very, very, very sick with COVID. So, all we have to be is alive and on this planet to know what uh, the unwanted is, right? In
mm,
ways small and also seismic,
mm,
right? I would categorize these as small. I mean, hopefully they remain small challenges, but
mm.
there are bigger ones, and we're all living in this world with so many complex and
Yeah.
heartbreaking difficulties in the world, the wars in the world, the annihilation of other humans, the climate crisis, social injustice. Like, it's a long list.
Yeah.
And this is a practice for me in a moment to moment, but and how do we not get overwhelmed? Because in my experience, when I get overwhelmed by the challenges at hand, I lose my agency. I lose my capacity to engage proactively, with what's deepest and best in myself, to
Mm,
to work at the edges, of what's possible, to add any amount more love, I guess I would say, when you come right down to it, to a world that's heartbroken.
yeah. All the things that show up, sometimes the added distress it brings is when we fuel it with our thoughts and go into some narrative of like, why is this happening to me? I can't believe, it's just me. I have bad luck. Like the ongoing kind of the strong reactivity,
Yeah,
and it doesn't mean we have to like what you're saying. You don't have to like having mold. You have to deal with. You don't have to like that your partner woke up with COVID. It's not like, oh, great, wonderful. It's more, it's just how it is.
yeah,
And there's a steadiness even in how you said it, rather than like, look at what else I have to deal with, and what the world is just horrible everywhere, including me this morning. It's like, how does that feel different, isn't it?
well, and as you and I probably all know, and anybody who's listening to this knows, people do go exactly where the direction you're describing,
Mm,
blaming oneself. Another reliable go-to is blaming other people. And in my experience, those are the attitudinal orientations, and then of course the thought patterns that accompany those attitudinal orientations that have everything to do with our experience of depression and anxiety and all of the mood imbalances that can get so entrenched, and then, oh my goodness, we get so caught and imprisoned
mm,
by them. So I think you're exactly right. Like, it doesn't have to be through mindfulness, but mindfulness, it turns out, is a very, very reliable, skillful means of learning to attend to our patterns of thinking and
mm,
and what arises when we have moments of difficulty, or difficulty that extends for many moments. Some difficulty isn't easy to resolve. In fact, some can't be resolved at all. We have to
yeah.
learn to live with and not be compromised by in some way.
Mm,
So it's an essential part of all mindfulness practice, but in teaching MBSR for many, many years, and more recently teaching mindfulness-based cognitive therapy,
mm,
and teaching other people to teach it, which really requires me to go back, always to the beginning. What what is this really about? How does this come to life in my own experience, right? Is this moment to moment watching the nature of our thinking, right?
mm.
Um, and I have a number of things to say about that, but is it okay if I just kind of jump track for a
Please,
moment?
please, this, yes, please.
Yeah. So you mentioned, in the introduction that was so kind, that one of the experiences I've had recently is being diagnosed with and then treated for cancer. And of course, so many, many, many people, I'm sure people listening to this have also had an experience with cancer, if not themselves, then
Mhm.
a loved one, maybe someone in the family, friends. It's hard to find anyone today whose life hasn't been touched by cancer in some way.
Mhm.
When I was diagnosed, in fact, the first day when I was in the doctor's office getting the diagnosis, which was completely out of the blue, completely unexpected.
Mm.
There's no family history of breast cancer. I don't
Oh.
have, like the risk factors. So
Mm.
this was a routine mammogram that showed that I had breast cancer. So my mind immediately went to this wonderful book I read and would highly recommend to you, Kasim, if you haven't read it, and to
Mhm.
anybody listening. That's by Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche, a Tibetan meditation teacher and master, who wrote a book called In Love with the Whole World.
Mm.
You gotta love that title, right? In Love with the Whole World. It's both parts like meditation instruction manual and also like an adventure story, because he left his retreat center as a highly esteemed Rinpoche teacher and went on a 4-year wandering retreat where nobody knew where he was for 4 years. And one of the early chapters in the book, I won't talk about the whole book, but one of the early chapters is called What Will You Do in the Bardo? And for those who don't know, Bardo is a Tibetan term that classically talks about the space between death, like our actual death, and rebirth.
Mm.
Buddhists believe in rebirth.
Yeah.
But the teachings, as they're often taught, are also pointing us towards these moments of in-betweenness in our daily lives, like these gaps between something that's ended, even a thought, an
Mm.
event, and what has yet to emerge, right? What has yet to begin.
Mm.
And it's interesting, it happens all through the day when you get really interested in watching, like even if you complete a task and then your mind goes, what next? It certainly happens, I can attest, when a diagnosis of cancer lands and there's a lot of not knowing. Like the Bardo is all about the place where uncertainty, like, is the currency of the realm, like this liminal space, dusk and dawn, the interstitial. And I've always been really intrigued with these liminal spaces to begin with, but I really got to watch. So what happens? And in Mingyur Rinpoche's book, he talks about his father, who was a great Tibetan meditation teacher in his own right.
Mm.
He would ask, so what do you do in the Bardo? And what
Mm.
he's really asking is, so what do you do with your mind? And what do you do with your heart?
Yeah.
This is really referencing what you were speaking to earlier. Where do we tip? We don't want is what we get.
Yeah.
So that's just one example, and I would really say, because this is my experience, that cancer is just a placeholder for
Mm.
whatever's happening in our lives that we most don't want to be happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, cancer's one version, but I've lived a long time. There have been many other versions. In fact, there's a current relational difficulty that is, I find, actually harder to work with than cancer was.
Mm.
So we can think broadly about the challenges that arise as human beings and what do we do in the Bardo? What do we do with our minds?
Mm.
So I'll pause, but because I think that's a frame for how I'm working currently with difficulty. And then there are two directions we could go in. I'm happy to go in either or both, depending on the time.
Yeah.
One is really, how do we work with the mind? And
Yes.
the mental agitation, the proliferation of thoughts, the what ifs, the why me's, the whatever form it takes, of this can't be happening, right? Refusal, that kind of default mode that is, I think, a quality of shock, actually. Like this can't be, this isn't real, right?
Yeah. And it shouldn't. There's a shouldn't. It shouldn't be happening. Yeah.
And even more, this
Yeah.
shouldn't be happening to me.
Mm.
As if I have, different from all other humans on the planet, And
Exempt.
I say this with huge compassion because
Yeah.
I've watched it in myself. Like, how could this be happening to me? Right? Which is very, very interesting and a whole nother topic of conversation of, the nature of self and how we identify. And in identifying as me, I'm Janet. For God's sake, I'm a meditation teacher and a counselor,
Yeah.
right? All these identities. I'm a mother, I'm a daughter, I'm a wife, I'm a dog owner, But in every way we identify and define a certain role, we're also creating some sense of separation from what's deepest in us, which in my view is our humanity. So I think within difficulty, there really is this profound teaching available that has to do with, oh, this is what it is to be human. And I am no different from the Israelis struck in the attack on October 7th. And I am no different from the Palestinians in Gaza fleeing from the bombs. And I am no different from the Ukrainians who are fighting, for their lives and their country. And I am no different from the people of color who, of course I am different. Especially when we're talking about how we've been racialized. Of course I am different. And the privileges I have, which have been totally unearned, are different. But in that quality of heart, can I see myself in you? And can I see you in me? And then can my heart break open with love?
See, this is, you're sharing really deep, deep wisdom that you've been living. You've truly been living this deep wisdom of opening with love to the difficulty, the unwanted. And it's so easy to reject the things that show up. It really is so easy to go and then to fight it, and then to reject it, like you said earlier, and then we just amplify our suffering deeply and create this othering, as you said, like those people out there, these people. And we forget that, like, just like me, in terms of they're human. As long as we're human, we're going to face something. Not just because why, like it's bad luck or it's just me. The fact that we're human, we're going to face moments of deep pain, agony, sorrow, and deep moments of joy. And it could happen on the same day,
Yeah.
few moments apart.
I think you're really putting your finger on the only reason why I can, with integrity, invite someone, myself included, to turn toward what I don't want or like. The only reason is because refusing to look at it, blaming self or others, it just doesn't work
Yeah.
in terms of relieving our distress. Because really, honestly, Kasim, if it worked, if it caused us in a durable way to feel less distress, suffering, pain, I would say go for it. But as I said, this is an ongoing experiment. But so far in my 61 years, it's never actually helped. Maybe
Yeah.
for a few moments, or maybe even some years. But is that your experience too?
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. I mean, I guess we do it because it provides some relief and it's some coping. Like we learn maybe avoiding can be helpful at times. So let me avoid looking in, let me avoid doing this. And it provides some relief,
Yeah.
but it really doesn't provide what we're exploring, the potential, human potential
Yeah.
for growing, learning, and really healing. So that's what's missed if we just stick to the old coping patterns of rejecting, pushing, avoiding, shutting down, disconnecting, blaming. Like, yeah.
And you hear, I can feel in the words you're using there, which I think are spot on,
Mm,
how much they separate us, right? It leads
mm,
to further isolation, further that disconnecting that I think most of us know from our experience. I certainly know from my experience as a counselor working with many, many people with trauma and depression, anxiety. That sense of isolation also exacerbates our suffering, right? Disconnection. We're humans. We're intended to be in community, and it's one of the big problems of our world today is we can think we're connecting through social media, whereas there's not that kind of intimacy where we tell each other our truths and we
mm,
experience the healing of being held, honored, respected, loved in the midst of the
mm,
messiness, of life as it unfolds moment to moment.
mm. I so love how you're saying this because that's the beauty of being human. It's the messiness of all of it. And there's so much suffering when we try just to iron it out so it's just clear, everything's perfect, planned, everything going according to plan, and then I'll be happy. Like, if all my ducks are in a row and everyone else's ducks in a row, life will be good. But
My question is my real curiosity, like, wow, is that some default of the human mind that's based in the delusion of thinking we can control things that are by nature out of control and always changing? But I think that belief system, which until we face it head on, I think is very seductive. I'll
yeah.
just get all my ducks in a row. That will do it. And then it's taken as some personal deficiency. Something's wrong with me that the ducks are not in a row. In fact, they're kind of devolving, like it's getting messier and messier because in moments it does. And so how to see that this is the nature of our world and yet within it. So this is kind of an interesting question. With all that we can't control,
Mm,
lots,
yeah.
what do we have some element of control about, around, with, in? And in my experience, and I'd love to hear yours, that control has to do with the relationship we're in, how we choose to be in relationship with what's happening, right?
Mm,
So let's just take cancer because it's kind of an easy reference point.
yeah.
Um, my mind could have gone to why me? It actually never did, and I think I'm really lucky because I've worked with so many people who have cancer, some of whom have not survived it. Um, in in my counseling practice and in my mindfulness-based classes, so
Mm,
many people with cancer, also with AIDS, also with MS, also with Parkinson's, also with, fill in the blank. So I
mm,
really these extraordinary humans taught me that there's no it's like the Rabbi Harold Kushner wrote in his book
mm.
of the same title, bad things happen to good people.
Ah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That was a book actually I first read when, as a 14-year-old, my very best friend woke up and her father had died in the night. And she read the book, I read the book, like bad things happen to all of us, all of us.
Mm,
And so it's instead of asking like why me, relating it to why me? It shouldn't be happening. This can't be happening. It's more why not me?
mm,
Why and here it is. So let's not waste time, energy, resources on fighting what's here. This is here.
Mm.
How am I going to relate to it? Yeah. And how not to, in a way, I think this in this very practical way, how not to misuse our resources, which in times of poor health or
Mm.
crisis or loss, we need to shepherd our resources because they're not infinite, you know. They're vast. Our resources are vast and often much bigger than we think, but there's a real efficiency, I think I learned through cancer that I need to focus my attention where it can serve me best, you know, and that's not in
Mm.
fighting that this is happening.
Because that really consumes a lot of energy, mental energy, emotional energy, physical energy, rather. And that's actually, you're naming choice.
Yeah.
I've discovered through practice, I continue to discover this is the more I'm aware and more I can be present with my own reactivity, the more I have choice. The
Yeah.
more I have choice. Now I get to choose how to deal with this. You know, I didn't choose the challenge, but now that it's here, I get to choose how to work with it. Like you didn't like go, oh, let's see what we'd like on the menu of challenges in life. No, it just showed up. There it
Yeah.
is,
Hmm.
cancer diagnosis,
Hmm.
and then I think what stops us in our tracks is this, like, now what? And what you've been sharing, and I'd love to continue with that, is this: how do I turn to it? What kind of relationship can I have with the challenge that showed up? Because
Hmm.
that is where I can influence,
Yeah.
is my relating to that. So I'd love to go there, but I have to say I had the biggest smile in my heart when you mentioned the book. And I think you were 14, you were saying this was the book, Why Bad Things Happen to Good People. This was after my first experience as a teen going as a client to counseling after a traumatic event myself. And the
Wow.
counselor suggested that book.
Oh,
And,
wow.
and it was powerful for me earlier on to recognize, life brings stuff,
Mhm.
and how do I work with it? And that actually, that experience being with a counselor as a teen, working for this traumatic event that actually ended up in a hospital because of it, it was not good. And it, it's what ended up taking me back years later to be in this field. After going to business for a while, and then
Mm.
something in me, I was like, there's something I experienced that I want to share with people. Like that counselor, and I don't even remember her name. Like, she really drastically impacted my life
Oh,
as a teen. So I just as a little thing I
yeah.
want to share, because when you shared that, I was like, oh, you know that book? Like, not a lot of people know this book,
Yeah.
So bad things do happen to good people.
Well,
Yeah.
so thank you to, Rabbi Kushner for writing it, right?
Yeah.
Because it has
Yeah.
reached you and me at least, and my friend who lost
Yes.
her dad. And also, this is something you name so eloquently. Like, um, I would never ever wish on you or anyone else to experience a traumatic event,
Right.
especially as a child.
Yeah.
And we can learn the most valuable things that can shape the trajectory of our lives in the difficulty we experience. Isn't that like a mystery? Because if we had, if like I had my way, I wouldn't ever want me
Yes.
or you or any of our listeners or my family to experience difficulty, right? Like, I mean, I'm a parent of two kids and recently now a grandparent. And oh, I just never want
Of course.
anything bad to happen to my child, frankly, to anybody's child. And this is what I discovered as I was growing and growing up and facing what was mine to deal with,
Mm.
that in having the courage, and I do think it takes tremendous courage to turn towards what we don't like or want, what
Yeah.
hurts, uh, we might find out what's most essential about who we are and our humanity and the capacity of our hearts for love. I
Mm.
have, I continue to,
Mm.
and I still continue to not want the difficulties that land on my doorstep. You know,
Of course.
that's just human, right?
Yeah.
But Suzanne Kobasa is a researcher who is well known for her work on stress hardiness. And I'm
Mm,
sure you know her or who she is. She did this work at University of Chicago many years ago in the 70s, I believe, 80s. Um, she came up with 3 factors that allows people to face stress, okay, another placeholder word for what we don't want, and to come out of it actually stronger, uh, deeper, more resilient. And one of those factors is seeing, she calls it challenge. And it has to do with seeing what we don't want as something that holds within it the capacity to grow us. We have the
mm,
capacity to learn as we engage with the challenge, the unwanted, that has the capacity to develop who we are as a human being.
mm.
And for me, that has changed everything. When I could really, with cancer, with this more recent relational heartbreak, okay,
Yeah.
what do I have to learn here? What can this teach me? How can
Mm,
this grow my heart?
mm.
That's been a
What a
very
question.
reliable, yeah.
What a question to be asking. What can this teach me? Rather than like, why is this happening to me? It's like, how can this teach me? What can I learn from this? Doesn't mean I have to like it. So what a beautiful way. So that's the first thing you're sharing, and would love to hear the other points.
Well, two
Mm,
big points that I would really encourage people to inquire deeply into is one, that we need to develop our capacity to be the stewards of our minds. And by that
mm,
specifically, I mean to come to know the content of our thoughts. Because if we're not careful, our thoughts, which can arise out of distress, like a fever
mm,
arises out of a flu,
mhm.
we can take those thoughts to be true
Yeah.
and facts when they're actually symptoms of a certain kind of pain, distress, suffering. So this comes right out of mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, which has taught me so much about really getting to know where my mind tips. It's a little different for everybody, but actually there's
Mm,
something called the automatic thoughts questionnaire, which has studied humans from around the globe. When in a depressed mood, what thoughts arise? And you can Google automatic thoughts questionnaire. They're very simple sentences that have something
mhm,
like, throw out a few, like, I'm a failure.
mm,
People are judging me harshly. I can't do this, right?
mm,
So very negative
mhm,
thoughts, often self-referential, that if we believe them, think about this, I can't do this.
mm. Right.
That's a full stop, dead end.
Yeah.
But if we can say, oh, I'm having these thoughts that are based on my understandable low mood, my
Mm,
sadness, my grief, my fear, my anger, then we can see them as thoughts and not as us and not as the truth of things. So I just, as a little like visual, when I was going through, and one of the hard things about cancer is it takes a long time before you know actually what kind of cancer you have or what the prognosis is. Even to
mm.
stage cancer took like 2.5 months.
Oh,
The
that can
risk
be
of
agonizing.
so
Waiting.
there's a lot of not knowing, a lot of waiting, and a lot of, for me, what will you do in the bardo? What is your mind doing in the bardo? So what ifs? And I saw
Mm,
pretty early on, and thanks to this long history with practice and all I've learned from so many extraordinary teachers, I saw myself like in a woods on a path, and there were like branches of that path going in different directions. And many of those potential paths had like orange police tape, and an X across them. Do not enter. Do not go here. And it was kind of funny. And it also was very true. Like, do not go into what ifs. Stay with what's happening. Do not play down the future thought path of anxiety ridden. What if, the worst happens? Of course, the mind goes there, but the sooner we can catch it and come back, this is what meditation practice develops as a skill, to notice where our minds are and to intercept them in a way. Just like, if you throw a football, you intercept it. Like, don't have it go the whole way when it's going to cause distress, and come back to where we are now. And it's particularly helpful, I think, because the tendency to get caught up in our thinking minds is so endemic and makes so much sense for us humans, because thinking can actually really help us, right? Like, it's a brilliant, miraculous capacity we have. But in the realm of emotions, it can just become ruminative and it's like take us down into, the quicksand further and further, deeper and deeper. So one very skillful option, I practice this a lot, is then asking, okay, where are my feet? Finding my feet. Oh, actually, they're in contact with the ground. And what's underneath the ground? The earth. Okay, how about if I'm doing it right now, I can feel my feet on the floor, my sits bones on my stool. Wow, I'm right here. Drops me right in. So
Immediate.
so it's shifting from thinking about, dropping into experiencing now. And noticing if there's some element of distress, pain, constriction, a sense of pushing away, resistance, aversion. And if I notice that, can I breathe into those areas in the body on purpose, kindly, bringing space, not to change or fix anything, but just to, oh, there you are, right? Oh, here's this tightness in the chest, in the belly. Maybe putting a hand, on whatever part of the body might be holding that mental tension that, manifests as thoughts, but often there's a corresponding sensations in the body, and we can bring attention here and shift out of thinking into experiencing. And then bring, oh, they're there. I think of they're there, that kind of patting like you do intuitively with a baby. They're there, they're there. It's just for comfort, right? This is hard, and it's okay. It's okay to feel it right now. So I practice that a lot, coming into the body. If the chest is too upset, come to the feet. Feet are very, very helpful, unless there's, of course, some injury or pain. But hands can come into the hands. Often they're neutral enough to rest the mind in. So that was sort of one avenue, working with the mind, paying attention to what is the mind doing in the Bardo. Does that make some sense?
Yes. I mean, this is like a master class on how
Mm.
to work with thoughts that we can get caught up so quickly. And really, as quick as we're lost in them, we can come back right here. This is what's so really powerful of what you're sharing is, and the visual is beautiful about in the forest, and there's like these different pathways, roads, and like, don't go here, don't go here. And even the way you're describing it, there's like just a knowing. I don't have to go there. And without putting down or getting upset at the mind, without getting agitated, like, why am I thinking this way? I can't. Now we're spitting again. You're just like,
Yeah.
nope, not going there. And by doing so, as you were sharing it, like it got me to see as well the other pathway that just opened. Now there's another pathway that wasn't there moments ago when we were just looking at, here's what everything's going to go bad, and or this person is going to do this, like predicting the future, like a family, a relative, a friend, a colleague, whoever, someone we work with. Oh, they're going to do this for sure. And they might, but we don't know.
Or replaying the past, right? That's another reliable
Yeah.
path. Our mind went going over and over, ruminating what was said, what I could have said, what I should have, right? And again, ooh, honey, no, don't go there. Don't stay there. Come back, come back, come back,
Yeah.
come back. So I see it as an act of kindness, both
Mm.
act of wisdom, right? The wisdom being that doesn't help. It actually
Mm.
just amplifies or exacerbates the suffering by getting caught, round and round and round and round.
Mm.
We do it. I'm not saying like it stops with one return.
Right.
Maybe it's like 500,000 times a day, which it can feel like sometimes when whatever we're dealing with is particularly intense and
Mm.
grippy, grippy.
Yeah.
But if we practice that over and over and over again, my experience is, and I don't know if you have like comments that people can write in on these podcasts, but like test it out yourselves,
Mm.
listeners. What happens? And I remember one event that was very, 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 very difficult. And I worked with it 3 weeks. This more recent one has been more like months, but waking up thinking of it, going to bed thinking of it, rehashing over through my mind,
Yeah.
but keeping at it, letting it go, coming back, accepting this is how things are right now. This actually is happening right now. And bit by bit, the grip, goes from like the back of the neck to maybe a presence by my side to maybe, a little bit further away, right? As I regain my sense of equilibrium. So test it
Mm.
out is my encouragement. Don't take my word for it, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
What a beautiful invitation. And I would encourage anyone who's interested in doing so, please do so. Feel free to put in the comment section below, like what, test it out. What did you
Yeah.
discover?
And this is what
Because
we
really,
do in our classes, right? Like
yeah.
we practice, then we go away for the week, then we come back to class a week later, and we've been practicing, right? And testing things out. And we share with one another what we've learned or what feels still like it's got us in this strong grip, and we support one another. This is hard,
Mm.
hard work.
Yeah.
But I would say, what else are we going to do,
Mm.
right? It's sort of like that game of Uncle, where you're pinned, and then you go Uncle, Uncle to get out. There's no person to say Uncle to, right? We're here, hopefully, for the duration. That gives us plenty of opportunity to turn towards and work with what's here.
Yeah. And it's so beautiful. Seeing that in the classes and MBSR and mindfulness based stress reduction, mindfulness based cognitive therapy that you teach as well, seeing the way that people start connecting and relating
Mm,
to their own challenges, but also to each other. And I'm like always left at awe, like wow, the human potential. Like really, if we have more spaces
mm,
like this where we can see each other with kindness and compassion, and be so real and authentic and heartful, and just be real with
yeah.
the intention of being kind and supporting one another. Like I'm that's one of the reasons I love to keep teaching this. Is just it really is a treat for me. It was like when I look at my calendar, I'm like, what's next? Oh, teaching MBSR tonight. It's like, let's see what comes up. Let's see what comes up with this.
That's why I'd
Because
love to be in one of your classes. Yeah, I've often thought and said, I think one of the greatest sources of our suffering is the thought, it's just me. It's only
Mm,
me who feels this, who's experienced this, who suffers in this way. And one of the things we learn when we are able to be authentic and vulnerable is it's not
mm,
just me, it's the human condition. And that, in my experience, shifts things. It can bring, instead of this kind of shame, that I'm feeling this, it can bring a sense of dignity. Well, I'm
Mm.
experiencing this and I'm still here and
Yeah.
I'm facing what's here with the intention to learn and grow, right? There's this
Mm.
inherent, beautiful dignity about this capacity we have as human beings.
Yeah.
You know, one of my favorite poets, whose name I'm going to remember, um, he wrote "Song of Myself." Walt Whitman. He
Mm.
wrote in this long, beautiful poem. He wrote, "I am large. I
Mm.
contain multitudes." And I think of that poem like a mantra, when I'm feeling not large, but, you know, world weary or
Mm.
heartbroken by events, there's a sense of diminishment I can feel, right?
Yeah.
In the sense of,
Shrinking.
yeah. And I think I am large. I might not feel large in this moment, but I have felt it often enough, that largeness. It's not mine. It's more like accessing the largeness of awareness. It contains multitudes. It contains the sorrows and the joys. It contains this deep capacity of the heart to love as a response to suffering, right? I think of love as an activist's stance.
Mm.
Like, how are we going to respond to suffering in our own lives in the world? Well, what if I were more patient and more it's interesting. I think of my 88-year-old mother who has macular degeneration, is going blind. She has she's very hard of hearing, going deaf.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
in the face of that, how might I face the challenges and support her by being large, right? How can I support her in being large? There are
Hmm.
infinite variations on difficulty, but we all have human hearts.
Oh, yeah.
So, in the
Mm.
smallest of ways, this is sort of my pastime now. I would say it's not really pastime. It's a big part of my practice. Is when I'm in line at Walmart or the grocery store and
Mhm.
it's a long line and people forget something and go back to the aisles and we're waiting, right? Okay, can I keep my heart open there? Can I look at
Mm.
the checkout clerk, look them in the eyes, remember this person too is like me? I have no idea what they're facing, but I am quite sure they're facing something, they're holding something, right? Because that's just the nature of things. So this is also an interesting practice, is to go about one's day, the events of daily life, and
Mm.
can I remember the person's humanity that I'm on Zoom with?
What a practice to bring in if it's like it's available to us. Maybe today, maybe moments after podcast ends, if
Yeah.
someone is in a lineup, or the next time we're in a lineup and there's a sense of heart closing, like, see, that's becoming aware of something. That's even turning to. That's
Yeah.
turning to with awareness. And I really appreciate you naming that, because for some of the listeners, they may think like what is actually turning to, like if they
Mm.
haven't turned to something, or like that feels a little too scary. If you walk us through an example of that, like what is the turning to? You're turning to, connecting with, just to help.
Right. Well, so I moved from a small town to a
Mm.
larger town here in New Mexico. And one of the things that comes with a larger town, along with a lot of options and kind of delightful choices, comes traffic. So, one of my daily practices of turning toward is noticing there's a particular road that has 3 lanes on each side. So, I mean, I've literally lived 20 years in a town that had, 1 lane each way, or there was one road that had 2 lanes for a little
Yeah.
while.
So
But
traffic is not a big issue.
traffic, was not a big issue. And people are aggressive in their driving in a way that surprises me. Some people can be
Right.
aggressive. Some drivers have been known to be aggressive while on the same road with me. And so I notice what my mind is doing. Instead
Mm.
of just going, "What? How can you do that?" Or, like
Yeah, what's wrong with this person? Or
I really watch an immediate hit of reactivity and how easy it is to be seduced into thinking something is wrong with them.
Mm,
They're not driving in the way that I want them to.
yeah.
They just cut me off, right? All these ways we can fall into default ways of seeing, perceiving, but it's suffering. And so, can I turn towards it right there and go, "Whoa, everybody's fine. Can I turn my attention towards my body, not close my eyes because I'm driving, but can I take a deep breath? Can I settle into my chair? Like everything's just fine. There's no
Mm,
problem here, right?"
mm,
And so that's a very, very practical place to
yeah.
practice being awake. One, for safety's reasons, but the other is because, like, how many times a day is there cause to notice irritation? Say you
Mm,
have to be online with a tech person and you're not quite getting through to, and they want you to wait and they're not going at the speed that I would like, and well, here's practice right here too.
yeah.
So the beauty of mindfulness, and you know this well, Kasim, is that it's as applicable to the moments of unpleasantness that are just part of living and kind of the administration of life
Hmm.
as they are to the biggest crises, the biggest losses,
Yeah.
the biggest diagnoses, the biggest relationship challenges.
Mm,
It's like a wide. It's applicable to any and all situations. It's applicable
mm,
to war, and
mm,
and and because of course war comes out of a human mind. It comes out of
yeah.
human minds. So watching our minds, and then I guess the really important thing, because I think it's what is the biggest part of my practice these days, is noticing where kindness gets shut off or shut down, right? Notice where I make someone else, say a driver, an other. They're not like me. They're aggressive, or however, fill in the
Yeah.
blanks. That moment of separation where we miss the humanity that's shared and that's common, and that person too, maybe they're having a crisis in their lives, maybe they're trying to get their parent to the hospital. Who knows, right? But uh, really noticing where the heart shuts down.
Mm,
Because one of the benefits of having cancer, I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but it's a powerful teacher, is that
mm,
life is short and end of life always uncertain. We don't know when, we don't know how. And what would it be like? I mean, I'm asking myself the same question,
mhm.
to really engage with the world with the heart open, not foolishly, not naively. There
Mhm.
are times to be fierce
Yes.
and assertive for sure.
Mhm.
And can we release and open, release and open, release and open? I think that's the biggest part of my practice.
Mm. Well, this practice that you're naming, you truly have been living, continue to live, and you remind me as well as you're sharing this is being with the little moments of stress, reactivity, the big challenges on a world scale level, the big catastrophes, and also being there for the joys, being there for the, because when we get so caught up in everything that's not working, we actually forget the things that are working, and we miss out on the beauty that's right, like right there at the same time right over there. And I have to say, throughout this conversation we've having, there's a beautiful sound of birds coming from where you are, and I'm like, how pleasant, like, for the listeners, it's, this wasn't planned, or this is not like an added audio. It's like, this is real birds. And how often do we like truly tune into sounds, whether it's
Yeah.
sound of birds or a sound of a wind or a sound of trees. It's just like these moments of pure pleasure when we can be just present. And that takes us back to what you shared earlier, 10,000 joys,
Yeah.
10,000 souls. Can we also notice something pleasant? Maybe today, any of the listeners, through the senses, something pleasant, a sound, a sight, a sense. It's available. It could be a cup of tea. You're like, that was tasty.
In fact, it's a practice. Many people write gratitude journals at the end of the
Mhm.
day. I actually am not doing that at this point, but I do um, open. I was just hearing the sounds before you said
Yeah.
that, and the spring, we have a nest that the birds built, like, right outside our kitchen door
Oh,
on
did they?
the rafter, and I couldn't see in, but I could reach my cell phone up and take a selfie, and
Ah.
there were 5, like, these aqua blue eggs, and then gradually, one day I saw these little heads peeping over the side of the
No.
nest, and this was, like, the last month and a half, like, just, "Wow, what's happening?" And one day, I looked up, and the nest was empty, Off they
Oh.
went. Off they went. It was
Yeah.
beautiful. It was just
Yeah.
beautiful. So there are wonders all around, and I guess
Mhm.
it's incumbent upon us, given the complexity of the world
Mm.
and our own lives, to not just be passive and think, well, maybe something good will happen today, but actually maybe to lean in and really look for what's here to nourish us.
Mm. This looking for, even as you're saying with the birds, and the little birds flew away. Sometimes we take it for granted. These birds will always be there, or this. It's like,
Yeah,
we don't know. We literally don't know. So if we can just be with whatever is precious and not take things for granted, because literally what we have is right now. That we can guarantee this moment.
yeah,
5 seconds from now, who knows? So that's part of the preciousness.
yeah.
Yeah.
And given that, this is kind of takes me back to your first question of, as a child, could I have imagined? Um, we're not generally taught all the
Mm.
things that we've been talking about today, right?
Yeah.
That we have
Yeah.
these choices about how to relate to life, which is full of suffering, and not think that our job as a human is to either, avoid it as effectively as we can, work really hard to get the ducks lined up in the row, or buy the next, wonderful thing that comes out to protect us from it.
Yeah.
It's really quite radical to say, all right, given that this is the nature of things on this planet,
Mm.
how am I going to relate? And that there are ways to learn, that are
Yeah.
really, really, really reliable. And I guess I don't know if we're winding down now, but I
Yeah.
think one thing I would love to share is that when the recent set of circumstances, arose in my life of difficulty,
Mm.
I felt really well equipped to
Mm.
cope with them, not to avoid the pain of them, but to not add more distress than what was already a given in the circumstance. So, that's really something. It's like a test case scenario. Life will keep offering us test cases. And I think I see them now as like, well, this can help me up my game in a way.
Mm. So many pearls of wisdom and just heart speaking from deep experience. This conversation has been so enjoyable, so rich, and actually, I mean, it truly flew by. When I looked at the
Yeah.
time, I was like, "Oh, we like this flew by." And
Yeah.
I'm wondering, as we're coming to the end of for today, there might be more. Who knows, right? There might be more, but just for today, anything else? Any final thoughts for on your mind, as well as if someone is like, I don't know if mindfulness is for me, or maybe they've practiced, maybe they've stopped.
Mhm. Yeah, I am a passionate student and practitioner of mindfulness, but I'm also the first to say it's not about mindfulness. It's about remembering, rebodying your own innate beauty,
Hmm.
which is each of us, our deepest nature, beauty, heart, courage, dignity. And so I'm just hugely in support of whatever people find that is uh, opening in that way, right?
Hmm.
Not perpetuating these patterns of thinking and behaving that really entrench us in our struggle, but whatever can reliably open us to living our lives while we have them.
Hmm.
Time always uncertain, right?
Mhm.
And loving the people around us and being generous with our spirit, our heart, our actions. I'm really a practitioner of that. And turns out mindfulness is a very skillful way to open in those ways.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
whatever keeps you going on that path, I'd say pour your whole heart and mind into it, right?
Hmm.
Mm,
Well, thank you
Kasim.
for your generous, deeply generous shares and time. And I have to tell you, whenever we've come into conversation, or we've often as well in some Zoom meetings as well, I leave with a smile, knowing I've
Oh,
that day I get to see and talk to you, and it feels such a treat that I get to share this with others, and others get to experience your beautiful heart,
mm,
your deep wisdom, your humanity, and your willingness to just really live, truly walk the talk.
mm.
And it's truly such an honor to know you and to continue knowing you. And I look forward to more conversations outside podcasts. And it's just thank you so much deep love and respect to you. And thank you for the shining, beautiful heart that you bring
Well, right
in your work.
back at you, Kasim. And thank you for inviting me. This has just been a delight. And I go back to caretaking for my poor husband and the mold with renewed energy and inspiration and really a deep sense of having connected with you, like-minded, like-hearted. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank all the listeners for listening and watching. And if you found this useful and helpful, feel free to share this and like and maybe subscribe if you haven't. Thank you so much. And may your moments be filled with ease and may be present in as many of them. Thank you. Mm,
Bye
thank you
bye.
so much. Hello there, and thank you so much for stopping by this channel. I hope you find this content useful, and if you do, feel free to hit that subscribe button. It will really help me to reach to more people and keep this content going. Here we are journeying together, and let's see where this takes us.